this episode of my Curious Mind podcast, I'll be discussing which sport has the best athletes. Welcome into another episode of my Curious Mind podcast. I'm your host, Mr. J, and today we'll be discussing which pro sport or which sport has the best athlete. So on yesterday, I came across a clip of a podcast interview or a podcast episode on Andy Roddick's podcast, which is a former or was a former pro tennis player and did it at a very high level for many years, was a great tennis player. They were debating which sport has the best athletes, and their overall take or their main idea or their argument was that tennis players are the best athletes. Now, I've watched the clip several times, and I wrote down some of their reasons to why tennis players are the best athletes, but I'm gonna go ahead and share the clip, and I'm gonna try to break it down and kind of give my take on where they were trying to go and are they right or are they wrong. Let's take a look at this clip.
5 hours and 40 something minutes on the biggest stages. Like, to just put this into context, and since it's on TNT and they're coming off of having done basketball for a long time, and this isn't to say one thing doesn't mean you're throwing shade at someone else. I'm celebrating and applauding one set of athletes. An NBA game is 48 minutes played in air conditioning where you have teammates, halftime, timeouts, the whole thing, communication. I think tennis players are the best athletes in the world. And I it's the more I watch it, the more I think it. Tell me why I'm wrong.
I mean, I don't think you're wrong, because I think when you pull all the elements together of what makes up a great athlete, and Sean and I were talking about this the other day, you know, it's like, it's not just who can jump the highest or run the fastest or, you know, who is clutch. It's everything all at once. And to think about all the other sports that are in their own right so incredible and filled with these amazing athletes, a lot of them have support, right? You don't have to be the tallest, fastest, strongest, smartest at every moment and think on your own and be isolated on an island and battling your own demons and have no one to confide in all those moments more than you do in tennis. I mean, it's incredible. I mean, 5 hours and 40 minutes of just pure isolation and focus. I don't think there's anything else like it, you know? The only other sport I can think of that is as grueling timing wise and can go on and on and on, that seems endless sometimes, is like NASCAR racing. And it's like, it's completely different, right? It's, they start a team and they're still relying on each other, and it's a machine. Like it's the most incredible thing. I've never watched a sporting event like what we witnessed today.
Yeah, it's just I don't feel like you can have a skill that's way better, but it doesn't allow you to just silo off those skills to be effective. Does that make sense? Like an offensive lineman, and obviously, I know we're going to get the comments, you're not getting hit in the head. I understand the hard parts of a lot of sports, but I could have, in a team sport, I would have been able to almost isolate my skill set where I didn't have to hit backhands, right? Or I didn't have to play for
All right, so let's kind of unpackage that. It shouldn't be surprising, or it shouldn't surprise anyone that Andy Roddick feels that tennis players are the best athletes. That is his profession. That is something he did at a high level for a very long time. He was really good at it. So usually when you do something at a high level, you're really good at it, you're passionate about it, you're going to have a certain level of bias about that particular sport. And that makes sense. So it definitely isn't shocking that he said that. But when I first came across this clip of his podcast, I was thinking like he was going to add some nuance or some new perspective or something that I didn't know about tennis players that kind of made a better or more compelling argument for why tennis players are the best athletes. Because if I'm ranking the 5 pro major sports here in America, or if you look at all 5 sports, you say tennis, pro football, pro basketball, and I'm lumping in NBA, WNBA, pro soccer, and hockey. For it's just overall best athletes, I would put tennis in 5th place, just right off the bat, 5th place. I think to play the sport of tennis requires great skill and great ability, but I've never looked at a tennis player as this great athlete when compared to other athletes in other sports. I was hoping Andy Roddick would give, again, like some new perspective, something new to it, but they took the debate in an interesting direction that was different than I thought they would take it in. For example, they mentioned that it's not about running, jumping, or being clutch in a certain moment. Well, if you look up, being an athlete is generally with the understanding that you have some level of athleticism. And if you look up the definition of athleticism, you're going to find stuff in there about agility, moving, jumping, balance, aerobics, having those physical attributes. And you're going to see something in there about having the mental makeup and the ability to focus. That's the clutch part. Well, right off the bat, in their argument or in their debate of why tennis players are the greatest athletes, they eliminated those 3 things. So they kind of lost me at that point. But if once we listen further to what they were talking about in that 3.5-minute clip, they also eliminated height, size, and weight and strength. And those are biological things that you're generally, for the most part, born with. But they eliminated those. And then they made a weird comparison between tennis and NASCAR. Now, they have one thing in common, the fact that they're individual activities. And I wouldn't even say that NASCAR is a sport. I don't consider it a sport personally. I think it's just an activity. And that's a bad comparison because to be a NASCAR player doesn't require running, jumping. You definitely got to be clutch. You got to make the right decision. So I would say there is some clutchness in there. It doesn't matter about your height and weight. None of that really factors. You just need to be able to have that skill of driving that car and being able to focus and hone in on that skill for that 3, 4, or 5 hour period. But to me, they didn't really make a good argument for why tennis players are the best athletes. I think they actually did the opposite of what they were intending to do. To me, they gave a lot of examples to why I'm going to still rank tennis athletes at the 5th spot behind the other 4 major pro sports that we have here in America. I definitely would not rank tennis as number 1 in pro sports for us just athletes. But again, their argument was interesting. I wouldn't have went in that direction. And to be honest and fair, I did not watch the entire podcast episode. So maybe on the rest of the podcast episode, I'll have to go back and watch it and do maybe a follow-up video or a clip or a short about it. And maybe they gave more compelling evidence or information to why tennis players are the best athletes. Because in that 3.5-minute clip, I really didn't see any evidence or anything new to the conversation that would change my mind. So that's why I would put tennis players at number 5 behind the other pro major sports that we have here in America. All right. So when this particular podcast conversation happened, it triggered a first take conversation and debate on the debate show on First Take as well. And they debated which pro sports had the best athlete as well. And let's take a look. This clip is about 4 minutes long. And throughout the clip, I'll give some take and some information about it. And then after the clip, I'll try to put it in perspective and I'll give my take on which sport has the best athletes.
I mean, you can say what you want about him taking a shot, but obviously basketball had the best athletes in the world. You have guys 6'5" to 7 foot running up and down the court. An average basketball player run about 3 miles a game, and that's not being touched. Not to take away from the tennis, but they aren't being touched at all. They're barely getting to a sprint. They're 1-2 steps play. Now, like I said, there's no shade at anything else. And I kind of see my guy over there tilting your head like you want to say hockey. There is
I got my eye on you. Yep.
There is no, the hockey players are nowhere near more athletic than basketball players.
I don't know if you guys
obviously,
ever
like
met
I said, I'm not taking nothing away, but you have guys that are 6'9", 6'10". If you put them on a football field like a LeBron James running a 4.3 or 4.4, he would be the best player instantly if he had those type. If he stepped into a football field right now, he would be the best player. Basketball players is best suited for every other sport than basketball. There is no possible way.
Okay. When it comes to basketball, I will say this. LeBron James is an absolute freak of an athlete. No one is ever going to question that. He is. And until I see him on a football field or any other field, I can't comment of his dominance. But I'll use him as an example because watching him on TV, he's just unbelievable to watch as an athlete. We know that. But there is no question for me that hockey players and playing hockey is the most difficult sport and the toughest sport to play. And I'm going to quote my man Brian Burke on this because Brian Burke was a GM for a long time, and to me, he explains it the best. The athletic ability to play hockey, right? You think about baseball, basketball, football, they put the object in the athlete's hand, right? So we take that out, we put a stick in your hand, you got a stick handle. By the way, all those sports, they're in shoes. We take off the shoes and put on skates. By the way, there's 2 disciplines in ice skating in the Olympics that you can win an Olympic gold medal. We expect our players to do it as a matter of course. And then it's full contact. So you got to be fearless as well. You're getting hit, there's no out of bounds, and you got to fight. And by the way, our guys, there's no game management, there's no load management, there's none of that. They play banged up, Stephen A. They play hurt, they play with broken bones, they play with torn ligaments. I've done it, players do it, they're still doing it. The guys right now, I can guarantee you, there'll be a long list of injuries that these players are playing through. And I'm not saying it doesn't happen in every other sport, but hockey by far is the most demanding, the hardest sport, and the Stanley Cup is the toughest trophy to win.
Y'all are both more qualified than me because you're both former professional athletes. I'm a scribe that's covered the sports world for the last 30 plus years. I would tell you this. Tennis, Andy Roddick, former #1 player in the world, give him his respect. But tennis is more of a skill. Hockey, being able to skate like that, be on ice, them damn ice skates. I can't go 2 feet in ice skates, okay? It's a skill. But when you talk about pure athleticism and I think about the versatility that comes with it, I'm going to go the route of the basketball player. I'm going to go with Markeith on this, okay? And it ain't just because
Stephen A, it's a
it ain't just because
Put LeBron on skates. I want LeBron on skates first.
Hold on, wait. It ain't just because Mama Morris is watching. I'm speaking facts here. The fact is this. When you talk about the skill set, being on skate, that's an incredible skill. And maybe that's a different discussion. What requires the more skill? I get that part. Putting the ball in the hole compared to playing tennis, compared to playing hockey. Yeah, but in terms of athleticism, I'm going to say, I think hockey and tennis is more about skill. I think basketball is about skill, and it's about athleticism. I'm going to go with basketball on this one.
So, interesting takes. So we now have heard takes from why tennis has the best athletes. I wish they would have had a baseball and a soccer person in there. But yeah, and even a football person. All right, so we had a take on why tennis players are the best athletes. We've heard a take on why basketball players are the best athletes. And from PK Subban, I hope I'm saying his name correctly. I apologize if I'm mispronouncing his last name. We had a take on why hockey players are the best athletes. Now, let me go to the hockey. All right, so we've talked about the tennis, and let's look at the arguments for the hockey. So PK mentioned ability to skate. That's a good skill. That's something good that's needed if you're going to be a hockey player. The ability to handle physical contact and to make contact. Okay. Well, hockey players are not the only athletes that do contact. Other sports involve some contact. No load management. I don't know if that has anything with athleticism, but part of athleticism is having that physical strength and that ability to handle and endure. So I'll give him that. By the way, so far he's made better arguments than Andy Roddick with the tennis. And next he mentioned it's most demanding. In hockey, I've never played it, but I've watched it. Used to play the NHL live, I think NHL video game on Sega Genesis and Super Nintendo back in the day. And like I said, I watched it on TV. I once went to a hockey match and sat about 5 rows back, the Nashville Predators, when I was living in Nashville at the time, and I froze my ass off because it was cold as hell inside there. But it's a very physical and demanding sport. Watching it in person, you definitely get to see that. So those are the compelling arguments or evidence that PK was given to why hockey players are the better athletes. Let me try to go through some of these. Skating, I think it's just a skill. It doesn't make you very athletic if you can specifically just skate. Yes, hockey is the only sport of those 5 major pro sports that requires you to have skates instead of shoes. That doesn't mean that you're more athletic. That's just an equipment requirement. So that's different. We can say tennis requires you to have an object in your hand at all times. It doesn't make tennis players better athletes. Or baseball players, part of the time, have to have a special glove on to catch a ball. It doesn't make them better athletes. So I kind of debunks that argument. Contact. Because of hockey players do a lot of contact, they can handle contact. Well, football players contact a lot. There's even contact in basketball. People often forget that basketball can be and is a contact sport. So that kind of debunks that argument. No load management. I don't know a lot about hockey, and I can't speak to how often hockey players sit and how often they play, and the really good players, do they take a game off every 2 weeks or at the end of the week, or when they're on their road and they're doing it back-to-back, do they take that second game on their back-to-back off? And I don't know. So I really can't really speak to that. So I'll give him thumbs up on that, since that was part of his argument. Most demanding. I kind of got to, I'll debunk the most demanding part because all sports are demanding. Which one is more demanding is relative based on the fact of which sport that you're playing. Tennis players are going to say tennis is more demanding. Basketball players are going to say basketball is more demanding. Football players are going to say their sport is more demanding. Soccer players are going to say their sport is more demanding. So that kind of debunks the more demanding part. So overall, I think PK made some good points with the skating, but if you look at athleticism, if you look up the word, just like I said, with tennis players, it pretty much, the definition is a very broad definition. It's a lot of things are required or needed to have when you consider a person or athlete to have athleticism. And in order to be the best athletes, you have to have athleticism. So although I think hockey players are great athletes, I agree with Stephen A. Smith. I think like tennis, it's more of a skill, just like even golf, which I don't think I've even mentioned. It's more of a skill. It's just something, a specific thing that you do. I don't think you have to be a great athlete necessarily to do that particular skill, or let me not necessarily say skill, but to be able to do that particular thing. You don't have to necessarily have great skill or be a great athlete. It's just a thing that you do. You play hockey just like tennis. It's just a thing that you can do really well, and you don't have to have this great skill or be a great athlete to do it. Now it brings us to the last sport that was mentioned, was basketball, and one of the Morris twins, I can't remember which one that was, but basically he used a lot of interesting comparisons. He talked about how basketball players are some of the tallest athletes of all the sports, which is true. The average NBA height, and I don't know if he mentioned this, is usually around 6'7". You're required to jump, you're required to run, you're required to move vertically, you're required to backpedal, you're required to shift side to side, you're required to run forward, you're required to go at full speed, stop on the dime, turn and backpedal in the other direction. You have to play offense, you have to play defense. It's constantly moving. You run in an average full NBA basketball game. It's about over 3 miles that you're running, and basketball is a contact, and it requires a certain level of skill and physicality. And you have to have all these things that tennis said you didn't have to have: running, jumping, clutch, height, size, and weight. You have to put all those things together. And also, if you look at most professional basketball players, and you even just take college basketball players, they generally play other sports. Whether it's, some of them may have played tennis, track, football, soccer, golf. You rarely hear about tennis players that play. I don't know of really great tennis players that are known for playing other sports. I don't know of great hockey players that are known for playing other sports. I don't even know great golfers that are known for playing other sports. I know football and basketball players that play golf and tennis, and they do in baseball, and they do other things in the free time, or just for charity things, or just for fun. So with that being said, I'm going to support basketball, that they have the greatest athletes. If you look at basketball players physically, from a biological point of view, they're born with all the gifts. You look at some of the greatest basketball players. Not only are they tall, they have the long arms, they have the lateral quickness, they have the vertical ability to jump off the ground, come back down, and make that jump again, come back down, and even make it a third or fourth and fifth or sixth time. However many times you need to keep jumping up, they're able to do that. And they're able to do it in an instant and constantly repeat it. Not only do that, they're able to run and move all different types of movements, and also play through contact. If you haven't had a chance to go to an NBA game, if you ever get a chance, go to one so you can see the sheer size of NBA players and the fact that they're that height, and some of them, the weight that they are, and they can move the way they move, and they can do those repeated movements constantly up and down the court. And for an average of at least 3+ miles in an average NBA game is amazing. So I personally support the NBA players, or professional basketball players, and I'm gonna lump in WNBA players as well, as being the better athletes. Because if you Google athleticism, which goes along with being a great athlete, you need that athleticism. Basketball players check all those boxes. They have all those things. Doesn't mean that the other athletes in those other sports aren't great, but it just means that I personally think all the evidence supports that basketball players are the best athletes in all the sports. You can just look at I think they gave the example of LeBron James. He was a really decent all-state football player. And I'm pretty sure you got a lot of other basketball players that probably were all state or heck, even all American in college and other sports. And that's why I think basketball players are the best athletes. Now, if you disagree with me, make sure you chime in on the comments. Make sure you hit the subscribe button, like and share with someone. And I enjoyed this conversation today, but I'm looking for the comments, and I want to do a future podcast episode to follow up. And maybe I think on the follow-up podcast episode, I will invite people that play those other sports and maybe get a panel of 4 or 5 or 6 people. We kind of discuss and go back and forth because it'd be interesting, because today we pretty much only got the perspective of a tennis player, a professional basketball player, and a professional hockey player. It'll be interesting to see what a golfer says or what a baseball player says and what a soccer player says. So until next time, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button, and peace.